St. Paul is pouring millions into a new downtown, and if you own property anywhere in Ramsey County, this is going to affect your bill. In this video, we're breaking down what's changing and what it means for buyers and homeowners across the Twin Cities metro. I've been working in this market for over 7 years, and my team and I have sold close to $1 billion worth of real estate, and I haven't seen a county budget move like this before. All right, before we get into the details, let me set the stage for what this plan is about. From the highway, downtown St. Paul might look the same, but if you walk around there on a random morning, you can feel how much has changed. The towers are still standing, but the energy that used to fill them is missing, and that empty space is starting to show up in a place homeowners care about, their property tax bill. Before the pandemic, downtown's office vacancy rate was around 20%, which was not great, but still something the market could deal with. But last year, it had climbed past 30%. So more than 1 in 3 competitive office floors was sitting empty. And in the core downtown submarket, vacancy was close to 40%. That means dark floors, fewer workers, less lunch traffic, closed skyway connections, and storefronts that used to serve office crowds sitting empty. You could see for lease signs on buildings that used to help carry downtown's whole business life. When office buildings lose value, they bring in less property tax money. When that money drops, the gap has to land somewhere. In Minnesota, part of that shift can land on homeowners. Ramsey County's levy went up 8.25% for 2026, and for the owner of a median value St. Paul home, that was about $22 more a month, close to $265 a year. If you've watched what happened with property taxes over in Hennepin County, you know how fast this can move once commercial values start falling. Ramsey County is trying to get ahead of that before it becomes harder to fix. Again, the root issue here is empty office space losing value. In fact, the biggest piece of this downtown problem ties back to Madison equities. Over about a decade, husband and wife team Jim Cockrell and Rosemary Courtgard bought up a major piece of downtown St. Paul. At one point, they controlled around 1.6 million square feet of office space, including buildings like the First National Bank Building, the U.S. Bank Center, and the Alliance Bank Center. They borrowed heavily to do it, and in some cases, they personally backed the loans. Then COVID hit. Workers stayed home, office demand dropped, and the whole plan started to fall apart. By 2024, Madison Equities had put the full portfolio up for sale through CBRE. There was no asking price, just an invitation for cash offers. And CBR's read on the market was pretty blunt. Office investors weren't lining up because they saw the area as having way more office space than demand. Then the default started. In December 2024 alone, 3 buildings were handed back to lenders, including a pair that later sold for a fraction of what historic downtown buildings like that should be worth. The Empire Building, built in 1889, and the Endicott Arcade next to it sold together for $745,000 in cash. These are 2 of the most important historic buildings here, and that's how far values have dropped. So Ramsey County didn't just sit back and hope downtown would fix itself. They built a plan. It just got approved, and the way they set it up is the part buyers and homeowners need to understand. Now, quick break. If you're looking at Ramsey County and trying to compare the St. Paul metro, that's exactly the kind of conversation my team and I help buyers work through. My contact info is in the description below. So reach out to me and we'll talk through which areas make the most sense for you right now. Okay, back to the video. So let's talk about what the county approved. Ramsey County was looking at a $320 million problem, and the easy answer would have been to raise taxes and fill the gap. But this past April, the Ramsey County Board voted yes on a plan called Building Stronger Together, and every commissioner supported it. No one voted against it, which tells you this was not some last-minute fix. They had a full plan and everyone was on board. Also, the plan has 2 big pieces, and the first one is $250 million for downtown St. Paul. That money is focused on 4 things. First, moving big projects forward like the park at River's Edge. Second, creating a housing fund to help turn old office buildings into apartments or condos. Third, improving public spaces and transit connections. And fourth, helping local businesses grow through a dedicated fund. The second piece is $70 million for land development across the county. Ramsey County owns over 630 acres, and the idea is to use some of that land in a smarter way. The county can help get sites ready by paying for things like roads, cleanup, and planning, kind of early work that can make a project too expensive for private developers to take on by themselves. The important thing here is that this plan does not create a new property tax because it uses county money that already exists, bonding power, and outside funding they expect to bring in. So instead of asking homeowners to cover the gap, the county is trying to grow the tax base by using land that's been sitting there and by turning empty buildings into active properties again. And I have to reinforce that part is a big deal because about 14% of Ramsey County property doesn't bring in property tax revenue as it's tax exempt. So if the county wants more revenue without another levy increase, one of the clearest ways to do that is to add more taxable development. Keep that in mind because when we compare St. Paul to the suburbs later, this no new tax structure is what makes the plan worth paying attention to. Now, the project at the center of all of this, the one that could change how downtown feels in real life, starts right along the river on land St. Paul has overlooked for decades. For most of its history, downtown St. Paul hasn't had any easy connection to the Mississippi River. You've got active freight rail lines owned by Union Pacific and Canadian Pacific, Kansas City running between the downtown bluff and the riverbank. For decades, those tracks made it hard to reach the river from downtown. So even though it's right there, it hasn't felt like part of daily downtown life. If you worked downtown, lived downtown, or came in for dinner or an event, the river was close, but it was also kind of cut off. This River's Edge project is the county's new answer to that. The plan is for an over 9-acre urban park and promenade at Wabasha Street and Kellogg Boulevard with a land bridge over the railroad tracks. And for the first time, you'd have a clear public path from downtown down to the water. The vision includes green space with different levels, an amphitheater for events, trails connecting to the regional Mississippi River Trail system, and views over the river. And if the full project gets built out, these county projects could help spark more than $800 million in private development around it. Now on the funding side, Ramsey County has committed $120 million to the bigger River's Edge vision, with $26 million set aside for the park piece alone. The state has also put in about $6 million for design and pre-construction work. The design is done, and the site has already been cleaned up, which costs around $17 million by itself, but there are still some big steps left. The project still needs another $20 million from the Minnesota legislature to move into full construction, and that request is still pending. There's also no confirmed construction start date yet, and because the land bridge would go over active freight tracks, the county still has to work out air rights with Union Pacific and Canadian Pacific Kansas City, and that part is still not finished yet as well. So this is a project with real money behind it and a completed design, but it's not a done deal yet. Again, this project has had delays before since the county had a master developer attached to it at one point, and that developer exited. However, what's different now is everything happening around it. There's now more than $1 billion in public and private investment committed across downtown, and that gives a project like this more support than it had a few years ago. And while River's Edge is still waiting on that next round of state funding, the bigger riverfront connection is already moving forward. The Downtown Riverwalk, a 2-mile loop from the Science Museum to Union Depot along the Mississippi, officially opened. It's free, walkable, and open to the public. River's Edge would be the main piece of that riverfront vision, but the connection between downtown and the Mississippi has already started. And this kind of connection can change how people think about a downtown. You've seen it in places like Cincinnati with the banks, Louisville with the Big 4 Bridge, and even Minneapolis with the Stone Arch Bridge area. Once a city makes it easy to move from downtown to the river, the real estate around it starts to change. Not overnight, but with time, you can definitely see and feel it. That's what this project is trying to unlock. And while the riverfront is getting reconnected, something else is already happening inside the buildings above that bluff. A few years ago, Ramsey County brought in a firm called Gensler to review 20 downtown office buildings and identify which ones had the best chance of becoming housing. They looked at things like where the windows are, how wide the floors are, parking, and transit access with a clear takeaway. At least 10 of those buildings could work well as apartments or condos. If those projects move forward, downtown could add around 4,000 new residents while also taking millions of square feet of empty office space off the market. In older city neighborhoods, you might get a smaller lot, no garage, or no easy place to park a second car. These conversions don't try to copy the suburbs. They offer something different: new units inside renovated towers with modern features and easy access to restaurants, trails, transit, and everything downtown already has and is to come. That can change the feel of a neighborhood fast. An empty office tower hurts more than just the building itself, since it takes away workers during the day, making it harder for coffee shops and lunch spots to stay open. It also leaves dark windows and empty storefronts, and people start to feel like the area is slipping away. Housing helps bring that back, with people who live downtown being there in the morning, at lunch, and on a Saturday night. That kind of steady activity gives small businesses more chances to stay open, and it makes the area feel used again. The clearest example right now is Landmark Tower at 345 St. Peter Street, a 25-story building that finished a $97 million conversion last year, turning old office space into 187 luxury apartments. It has a rooftop deck, a golf simulator, and a C-suite lounge on the 18th floor with views of Rice Park, the Cathedral, and the Capitol. It opened in spring 2025 and is actively leasing. Right behind it is the Stella at 386 Wabasha, the former Ecolab University Center, a project that is in the middle of a $60 million conversion into 178 market rate apartments, with penthouses on the upper floors and a rooftop deck. It's expected to open this spring. Then you've got Central Station Block, a $130 million mixed-use proposal right next to the Green Line light rail stop. That would add 300 market rate units with a developer agreement already in place, and a purchase agreement milestone set for the end of this year. So when we talk about the $50 million housing fund inside Building Stronger Together, this is what it is meant to help with. The county wants to move more of those Gensler study buildings from idea to construction. And keep this conversion wave in mind, because when we get to homeowners and property taxes, this is where the math starts to really connect. Now, there's one more piece here that changed the numbers for investors. In 2021, St. Paul voters approved a rent stabilization ordinance with a 3% annual cap on rent increases. Then last year, the city council went even further, permanently removing the rent cap for any building built in 2005 or later. That exemption helped make the financing work for Landmark Tower and the Stella. Without it, these projects likely would not have moved forward. That also makes the next wave of conversions easier to picture, because investors now have a clearer path forward. And right now, we're gonna leave downtown and go about 10 miles north, because there's a massive development that is a totally different kind of opportunity outside of downtown St. Paul. Now let's head north to Arden Hills, where Rice Creek Commons is starting to take shape. Back in 2012, Ramsey County paid around $28 million for 427 acres of land that most developers wanted nothing to do with. The reason is that for decades, this has been one of the most contaminated sites in the entire state. This was the former Twin Cities Army ammunition plant, so it came with a federal cleanup designation, years of environmental work, and a site that needed serious prep before it could become anything new. And now that same land just earned one of the highest sustainability ratings in the world. This past March, the U.S. Green Building Council recognized Rice Creek Commons with LEED for Communities Platinum pre-certification. Fewer than 60 communities globally have reached that level, and the first building on site is designed to cut greenhouse gas emissions from operations by around 65% compared to a typical building of its kind. So this went from a land most people avoided to one of the most forward-looking development sites in the county. Back in April of last year, construction officially started on the first private building, a new commercial headquarters for Micro Control Company built by Ryan Companies. After more than a decade of planning and cleanup, buildings are finally starting to go vertical. The main road through the site is fully designed, and grading and site prep for roads, utilities, trails, and stormwater could begin as early as mid-year. The full plan calls for nearly 2,000 homes, plus retail, commercial space, civic space, parks, and trails. At full build-out, the total economic impact is projected to be around $1 billion. Now, to be clear, this is still really early. The Joint Development Authority is still choosing development partners for the bigger residential and commercial pieces, being a 15 to 20 year growth corridor, so you're seeing the beginning of it. not the payoff. But for buyers with a longer timeline, timing can make a big difference here. If you look at what happened near the edge of the North Loop in Minneapolis back in 2005, before it became the North Loop people know it today, you understand why moments like this are so important. Arden Hills isn't being talked about as a destination yet, and that's exactly when it's worth paying attention to. And if you're already looking at places like Champlin, Blaine, or the broader Anoka County corridor, Rice Creek Commons sits in that same northern growth zone where suburban buyers have been moving to for years. But this site could offer something those suburbs don't have in the same way: a walkable, LEED Platinum mixed-use community built from the ground up. So now that we've looked at all 5 pieces of this plan, it's time to talk about what this actually means for you right now. Let me bring this back to you, because everything we've covered comes back to your taxes, your buying power, and what this county could look like over the next 5 to 10 years. The goal of this plan is pretty simple: grow the commercial tax base and take some pressure off of homeowners. So when an empty office tower becomes apartments or a new project starts at Rice Creek Commons, that adds taxable value back into the county. And when more of the tax base comes from active properties, the county has less pressure to keep pushing that burden onto residential homeowners. That's why the no new tax structure we talked about earlier is such a big deal for people who own property here. Now, if you're choosing between St. Paul and the suburbs, one of the biggest things to watch is the downtown condo pricing gap. Downtown St. Paul condos are priced well below similar condos in downtown Minneapolis. We're talking about a gap of more than $100,000, even though the walkability scores between the two downtowns are very close. That gap has more to do with the perception than a permanent difference in how livable the area is. And with more than $1 billion in committed investment moving into downtown, that gap could get smaller over time. Right now, buyers still have leverage downtown, but as more conversions open, more people move in, and street life starts to come back, that leverage can start to fade. And for the 55 plus buyers watching, this is super relevant. Landmark Tower checks several boxes that buyers in that stage of life tend to care about: walkability, low maintenance living, access to Regions Hospital, Rice Park, the Ordway, Grand Casino Arena, and the downtown Riverwalk right outside. And the pricing is still much lower than what you'd see for a similar lifestyle in places like Scottsdale or Denver. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you there's no risk. River's Edge still needs state funding, and the railroad piece still has to get worked out. Central Station Block has a key milestone at the end of this year, but most of the Gensler conversion buildings haven't started yet. And for the bigger changes, the real timeline is probably a decade from now. Even once new buildings open, it does take time for people to see a neighborhood differently. But that's also where the opportunity is. When the money is moving before the public story catches up, that's when buyers need to pay attention. And right now, in downtown St. Paul and in Arden Hills, the money is moving. So if you're watching your tax bill, looking at downtown condos while the pricing gap is still there, or paying attention to the northern suburbs before Rice Creek Commons becomes a name everyone knows, this is the time to get ahead of it. If you want to talk through what this means for your situation, whether you're buying, selling, or trying to figure out where Ramsey County fits into your plan, shoot me an email today and we'll map it out before the market moves on you. And if you're looking anywhere in the Twin Cities, the next thing to understand is that the Minneapolis Metro is not moving the same way in every neighborhood right now. I've linked that video right here. And if you're buying or selling around here, I'd watch that next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.